Hello everyone, I am Mohit Sharma, a research scholar in IIT Madras. In this video, we are going to talk about Japan's electronics revolution from the post-World War II and its journey to become the global manufacturing hub for electronics. It's a miracle how a country whose economy was so devastated by the effect of World War II finally managed to turn itself into a global manufacturing hub for electronics within a few decades. The outlines are as follow. We'll talk about the post-World War history of Japanese electronics industry, then how the manufacturing of transistor began in the Japan. We'll talk about some famous technological innovation by Japan such as transistor radio, Walkman, calculator. Then we'll discuss the downfall of Sony against Samsung. This will allow us to understand the fall of Japanese electronics industry after the 90s. Finally, we'll conclude the talk. Japan is one of the most highly developed country in the world. Its infrastructure and technology are unparalleled. Japanese technology is well known for its precision and reliability of its product. The Japanese electronic industry is one of the largest in the world, but today's scenario is different as South Korea, Taiwan and China, United States, these countries are far more ahead of Japan's. Despite the massive devastation it suffered in the Second World War, Japan established itself as a rich global economic power in the world. Japanese companies are also known for their technological innovation. They have developed some of the wow product in the 60s and 70s, such as transistor radio, Walkman. They also produced first mass-produced laptops, VHS recorders, solar cell and LCD screen. Here are some of the major Japanese electronics giants. They are renowned globally due to their product and technology. After World War II, Japan could not even manage to make its own light bulb right after the war. Japan was occupied by the Allied forces until 1952 and its major city lies in Rio. Many of its cities have been bombed into shreds and many people were homeless. The unemployment was at peak as Japan industries and all are shattered during that time, and even it has loosened its all the allies, and so the people from all the other areas have come back to Japan. That's it made the employment at very high. The country's industry has been destroyed and food supplies were also non-existent. The stories from this period tell that 10 million people starved to death. However, Japan's spectacular rise after World War II is one of the history's most astonishing event. In just 20 years, Japan went from a war-torn country to one of the most highly industrialized and developed economy the world has ever seen. Japanese government invested heavily in the education system and social welfare program. Japan's highly acclaimed post-war education system contributed strongly into the modernization process. The country high literacy rate and high education industry were the major reason that allowed Japan to success in the later period. Japan's schools were also encouraged disciplines which benefited in forming effective workforce. In the 60s, Japan transformed into consumer economy. Japanese engineers created innovative electronic products like transistor radio, Walkman, calculators, etc. And due to this, Japanese products demand soared globally and the economy skyrocketed in the 60s. Although American companies created the semiconductor manufacturing equipment and material industry decades ago, Japan took over several critical areas in the market by the 1980s. In the 1980s, Japanese dominance global chip industry in many cases at the expense of American companies. Japanese companies produced 51% of the world's semiconductor, and three top chip makers, NEC, Toshiba, Hitachi, were Japanese. Today, the Japanese global market share is about half of what it used to be in 1980s, and Japanese companies are being outperformed by Americans as well as South Korean, Taiwanese, and even Chinese companies. In 2006, Intel and Samsung had a combined share of the market that was as large as Japan's 20 largest chip makers. Now we'll talk about how the manufacturing of transistor began in Japan. We'll start with the invention of transistor. The need of transistor arises due to the endless demand for the people who wanted to talk with each other. That required a demand for the expansion of the telephone network. The spread of telephone created a huge revenue, and this had allowed an abundant funds that used for developing the other technology. In order to transmit voice to even more distant places, a vacuum tube that can amplify signal was invented, and telephone network achieved a higher degree of clarity. However, vacuum tubes has drawbacks. They are bulky devices and has short lifespan. In 1936, at the Bell Laboratory, research began on an amplification device to replace the vacuum tube. At the end of 1947, researchers finally succeeded in amplifying a voice current using a solid-state device based on germanium, and it was the birth of the transistor. In the year 1948, June, Bell Laboratory publicized its discoveries of the solid-state amplification phenomena using germanium. This was a great interest to the specialists in this field. The birth of transistor in the United States is an important event as it helped to launch the today's semiconductor industry. Then the three scientists in 1948, John Bardeen, Walter Brattain, and William Shockley, developed the transistor, and they were given Nobel Prize for their creation in 1956. Here in the picture from left to right we can see John Bardeen, William Shockley, and Walter Brattain. This picture is taken from the invention that changed the world, the story of radar from war to peace by Robert Bouderi. In 1953, the commercial production of transistor was started in USA. There were some international conference on theoretical physics takes place in Tokyo, where most of the top scientists joined, including John Bardeen. This had got some generated interest in the Japanese engineer. Totsuko, which later becomes Sony, had developed a tape and tape recorder all by itself, with no technical support or advice from any company. AT&T Western Electric was impressed by this fact and decided that company with such engineering expertise would make good use of their transistor patent, and therefore they done an agreement and they given the patent to Sony. This is the first transistor manufactured by Totsuko in 1954. The first Japanese to read about transistor were two scientists. They were Professor Yasushi Watson from Tokyo University and Sakoji Komagata, the director of Japan's Agencies of Industrial Science and Technology. The two scientists understand the importance of the transistor development, and therefore they decided to contact the interested party to start a transistor study circle, and they did at Tokyo in the Electrotechnical Laboratory. Under the jurisdiction of Ministry of International Trade and Industry, well known as MITI, the transistor study circle began on to hold regular meeting at Electrotechnical Laboratory from 1948. In the physics section, chief Michio Hatoyama and his colleagues began to manufacture the transistor. They have seen the amplification phenomena which occurred in the transistor. However, they didn't had any concept of the theory of solid state amplification. Only after witnessing these phenomena with their own eyes, they finally tried to develop their own theories. Even though with repetitive experiment they failed, and they realized that the crystal is useless due to height effect. One of the main reason Bell Laboratory was able to produce transistor with such a high purity because they had various specialists and they have done all the groundwork in the development of transistor. So as a result, the researchers were able to get their hands on highly pure crystal. It is also here to mention that in 1950, William Farn from US has developed the zone refining technique, and that can produce a very high quality germanium crystal. The germanium crystal produced with zone refining technique has a impurity as low as 1 part in 10th billion. In the zone refining technique, a long tube filled with germanium is passed through a series of electrical heating coil. Germanium is melted in 1% and then allowed them to recrystallize. In this way, the impurity gets concentrated at the melted parts, which later can be removed easily. Zone refining is a memorable event in the history of semiconductor. By 1954, electronics department was established in the Electrotechnical Laboratory to spread the semiconductor knowledge inside Japan through open research, and there the task has been given to young researchers to first purify the crystal and then try to draw them into a single crystal. Japanese researchers were keen to know the transistor technology, and therefore they wanted to learn the required know-how, and because of that they visited the USA. AT&T Western Electric factory at that time, which was actually aligned with Bell Lab in those days, they cordially invited Japanese researchers who had rushed over to the United States. Since the industry was just starting, they readily took the Japan on the tour of their factory. No one in those days even dreamed of Japan someday would become a strong rival in the semiconductor industry. Japanese firms soon were looking for a partner to gain technical know-how, and in this way they did contract with the American companies. Like Hitachi concluded a contract with RCA, Radio Corporation of America. Similarly, Sony also did contract with Western Electric Factory. Now, during the IC manufacturing, gold wire interconnects was required, and the job of connecting gold wires one by one through a microscope was required very high patience and distressed fingertips. Such job was mainly done by young female factory workers, and they were famously called as transistor girls. Transistor girls' hard-working attitude and their skillful played a major role in bringing Japanese semiconductor industry up to the forefront in the world industry. Now we'll talk about the role of the Japanese government, basically their agency MITI, on the development of the Japan economy. MITI is accounting for the Ministry of International Trade Industry. It is a primary Japanese government agency, they are charged for the formulation and execution of industrial policy. Before the capital liberalization of the late 1969, no technology entered the country without the MITIS approval. We can also see that the MITIS important is so much on Japan's technological growth is that no joint venture was ever agreed to without MITIS scrutiny and frequent iteration of the terms. No patent rights were ever bought without MITIS pressuring the seller to lower the royalty or to make changes that will be advantageous to Japanese industry. No program for the importation of foreign technology was ever approved until MITI and its various advisory committee had agreed that time was right and that industry involved was scheduled for nurturing. MITI has also launched many projects such as the VLSI project and all that has helped to growth in the Japanese electronic industry. Sahasu Shigeru, the former vice president of MITI, said that government was responsible for economy as the whole, and it concludes it's an utterly self-centered point of view of things that government should be concerned with providing only favorable environment for industry without telling them what to do. Although MITI has given instruction to the companies on what to do, but there were also problems, and even the collaboration patent were not went so smoothly, but still the regulation and support provided by MITIS was very helpful to bring the Japan into the forefront of world's electronics power. Now we will talk about some of the key Japanese technological innovation which led Japanese product famous globally. The first one was the Japanese transistor radio, which was launched in 1955. So while on a trip to United States in 1952, Masaru Ibuka, the founder of Tokyo Telecommunication Engineering Corporation, which later known as Sony, discovered that AT&T was talked to make to give the license available for the transistor. In August 1955, Tokyo Telecommunication Engineering Corporation introduced the TR-55 transistor radio under their new brand name Sony. With this radio, Sony became the first company to manufacture the transistor and other components they used to construct the radio. Printed circuit boards were used at that time. This was the unusual things. Here is the picture of the Sony TR-55 transistor radio, first launched in 1950. In 1979, Sony has launched the Walkman, and it is like a portable audio cassette player. The popularity of Walkman is so high that Sony has finally extended this brand to serve for its portable audio devices such as mini disc, CD player, transistor radio, mobile phone. This is the picture of the metal cased blue and silver Walkman TPSL2, world first low cost personal stereo, which went on sale at a price of $150 in 1979. Within 10 years of the launch of the first model, over 100 millions of Walkman has been sold worldwide. This is the calculator Busicom LE120A, which is the first handheld calculator to use a calculator on a chip integrated circuit. The Busicom has tied with Intel, and they required a microprocessor. So for that, Intel developed Intel 404 microprocessor, which can be used in the calculator. In this way, Intel has also started in the microprocessor journey, and finally they were the lead microprocessor manufacturer. Busicom, however, later become bankrupt as due to the calculator war started in the Japan, because during that time there were more than 50 companies in the Japan. They are manufacturing calculator, and finally Casio and Sharp were able to lead this segment. In 1985, Casio has produced its first graphing calculator. This is Casio FX 7000G, which was developed with 420 bytes of memory, and it could store up to 10 programs. Later also, as the launch of the full color screen mobile, Casio also made Prism calculator, which has full color display in the late 2010. Now we'll talk about the war of Sony versus Samsung. How here in this chart we can see that the top black, this whole line is the for Sony, which shows that there is steep rise at 2000 when the Sony launches PlayStation product, and after that its growth declined, and then finally it become stagnation. Whereas this gray line for the Samsung shows that a steep rise, and after 2000 it was continuous rising and went ahead of Sony. Sony had been acknowledged as the world's best electronics manufacturer, but as we can see here, by 2002 Sony's market capitalization fall below Samsung, and by 2006 Samsung capitalization was $106 billion, which is twice that of Sony, and there is a 400% increase compared to 2000. Jong Yung-won, who became the CEO of Samsung in 1997, was famous for turning Samsung Electronics into one of the most profitable company in the electronics industry. Now let's see that why the Sony had a fall. So Sony's trouble begins after it acquires the Columbia Picture in 1989, and things turned out so bad that in 1994 it had to write off accumulated losses of $3.5 billion. Actually, Sony started a new group which later became the Sony Entertainment, which is now a big media house, but during the start phase it didn't went smoothly. Sony launched PlayStation in 1997, and then it again came in the profitable in the market, but again after that the sales becomes stagnant. But contrast, if you see the Samsung Electronics, they were profitable, and from 2002 to 2006, although in the earlier phase, as they were component supplier, their sales was highly volatile in the 90s. Sony didn't take Samsung seriously till 2002. We can also see from the statement of the Sony CEO Nobuyuki Ide. He told, Samsung found Sony a model or a benchmark for their brand image, the product design and the product planning they have learned from us. So Sony is a very good target for them. We still believe that Samsung is basically a component company. So here we can see that Sony didn't take Samsung seriously, and later this went wrong. And we can see that this is the how the media hype was for the Sony versus Samsung. Same media house has given the Nobuyuki Ide, the chairman and Sony Corporation, that 1999 as the top manager of the year, whereas in 2004 the same media house is giving the tag of worst manager of the year. If you compare Sony and Samsung Electronics, so that's not a because both our companies are different. If you see Sony has founded in the early years of post-war Japan and has attempted to make consumer lives more convenient by developing and producing innovative products such as Walkman and the computers. Samsung Electronics, on the contrast, was founded during the Korea's period of rapid industrialization. Its long-standing identity was the manufacturer of the key component. Both Sony and Samsung compete in the realms of TV, DVDs, audio, camcorder, digital camera, mobile phone. But it is interesting to know that they operate in the production of LCD through their SLCD joint venture program to gain advantage against their rivals. Samsung Electronics supplies DRAM and flash memory to Sony, but it also purchases charge coupled devices and batteries from Sony. The reason for downfall of Sony is as can be seen that Sony has not been able to release any new wow product such as Walkman, CD, Handycam or PlayStation in recent year. Sony also tried to milk its trinitron technology for too long, which didn't go well for Sony. Trinitron was Sony's brand name for the cathode ray tube used in television and computer monitors. And in the early 1995, Sony became the world's #1 supplier of color television. But in 1996, the patent protection for the trinitron design ran out, and then competition started, and Sony was not able to compete anymore in the television sector. Finally, plasma TV also arrived, and this also made the trinitron technology obsolete. Past success of Sony also obstructed its future, and it's also wonder that why Sony was not able to produce new product and services like Apple did for iPod and iTunes. Sony has also not able to aggressively invest in the digital technology and flat panel display, and that's what went behind the company like Sharp and Matsushita. Critics also pointed out that Samsung business division were excessively individual, that they were becoming silos, and there is no synergies were being created among the departments. Even Sony's chairman Howard Stringer also openly admitted that Sony needs better integration between our service and our device portfolio. Until the late 90s, Samsung was like a OEM company. What made Samsung Electronics a global brand in the last decade was its strategic selection and concentration. It started the DRAM business, and then it learned from that, and that it applied the same thing in the flash memory and LCD, and quickly grew up in that market also. Samsung was also quick to exploit the opportunity in the digital technology. It invested a lot in that part. Now, since in digital technology it is the chip which basically the gives the same quality, so that makes all the company in the same platform. In a nutshell, we can see that the Samsung Electronics foresaw the semiconductor would be a crucial component that would impact many related sectors. Samsung CEO Yoon also has a motto that stay at the forefront of core technology and master the manufacturing, and you can control your future. So we will now conclude our talk that why there is a rise in the Japanese electronics industry. So innovation and entrepreneurship played a key role in the economic development of the post-war Japan. Japanese entrepreneurs are willing to take risks, and they heavily invested in the innovation to that leads to a pursue a radically new product that defined the whole new market. Innovations such as electronic calculator, transistor radio, video camcorder, digital watches, CD player, Walkman, PlayStation, etc. Turned Japanese companies into global electronics giants. Japan also adopted new and more effective way of organizing their factory floors and the product design development, which leads to cost-effective production with superior quality of revolutionary product. It's also to be noted that Japanese manager, researchers and developers also worked very hard and contributed for the post-war success of Japan's economic development. Here are the references which I have used. Please, thank you.